Transcontinental Railroad. Construction started in 1862 and completed in 1869. Spans from both the east and west coast, meeting in the middle at Promontory Summit, Utah.
The main goal of the Transcontinental Railroad was to decrease the amount of time required to travel from the East Coast to the West Coast. In 1862, the Union Pacific Railroad Company began construction on their section of the railroad in Omaha, Nebraska. Coming from the opposite direction, the Central Pacific Railroad Company began construction in Sacramento, California. These two cooperative companies began construction with the intent of meeting somewhere in the middle. It took a total of 7 years for construction to be completed. The two rail companies, after years of physical and mental labor, connected their railroads on May 11, 1869. Two rails connected on Promontory Summit in Utah.
A brand new technology that was used a lot during the building of the Transcontinental Railroad was nitroglycerin. Nitroglycerin was used as an explosive to create tunnels for the railway. Nitroglycerin was invented in 1866. It was too unstable to transfer, so the Central Pacific Railroad Company hired chemist James Howden to manufacture nitroglycerin on site to avoid unintended explosions. When the railroad was complete, the total number of tunnels created was 19. Without the use of nitroglycerin, it would have taken much longer for the railroad companies to manufacture the tunnels.
The Transcontinental Railroad cost $50 million to build. The budget and outline of all the costs were laid out by Theodore Judah before work began in 1863. Since 1863, the buying power of a single dollar has decreased 1,778%, meaning that the Transcontinental Railroad would cost just short of $940 million to make today.
Some beneficial effects of the Transcontinental Railroad include: it opened the country for expansion and settlement. It provided the chance to travel multiple places across the country. You could bring all possessions when moving instead of having to pick and choose among them. You could ship large items including cattle, lumber, and resources. Allowed business to travel and expand to new markets, faster transportation, travel along the coast, and it allowed for easier trading of goods at greater distances. Some negative effects include easier for diseases to travel, many casualties during construction, extremely expensive at the time to both build and ride, and many people would have to start over when moving to the west.
The Transcontinental Railroad impacted the country in many ways. It reduced the cost of going across country from around $1,000 to just $150. Along its construction, many towns were settled and the Wild West culture was created. Because of the size of the railroad, a huge amount of labor was needed, and those jobs were filled mostly by Irish and Chinese immigrants, which helped jumpstart their integration into society. The native tribes in the area became more hostile due to the confiscation of their land and started attacking workers and settlements, which increased hostility back towards them.
The Transcontinental Railroad was a project funded by the federal government. The idea was first introduced by New York entrepreneur Asa Whitney in 1845. The idea didn't get very far for several years, but it was still discussed greatly. It wasn't until 1862 that the Pacific Railroad Act was passed due to Theodore Judah determining that the Donner Pass in California was an ideal location for constructing a railroad, and convinced Congress and President Lincoln to start building the railroad that was presented years earlier. The Pacific Railroad Act hired two companies that would build the railroad. The bill was a contract for the two companies, stating that for each mile of track built, each company would receive 6,400 acres of land, which was eventually doubled to 12,800 acres and $48,000 addition to the land. After that, the federal government only intervened with construction twice. Once shortly after the Civil War started, when the federal government put the railroad on hold to focus on the war, which resumed once the war was over. The second time was in 1869, when the two companies were working within miles of each other, delaying its completion. President Grant stated that until a meeting place and date were agreed upon, he would withhold federal funds from the two companies. As a result, the Transcontinental Railroad wasn't finished until May 10, 1869, several days after Grant's announcement.